Ever had someone show up on your land acting like they owned everything in sight? Well, that's exactly what happened to me, Quentin Nash. I've lived in a hand-built log cabin on the land my great-great-grandfather worked on in Tennessee, tucked away on the edge of what was once his farmland. My family's been here since before the Civil War. No joke. We've even got the original land grant framed on the wall signed by a judge and dated 1847. I never thought I'd need to pull that old document out until the day she showed up. Her name's Cheryl Netherly. She was the newly elected president of the Willow Creek HOA, a fancy development that just popped up half a mile down the road. And ever since they built those vinyl-fenced homes, they acted like they owned everything they could see from their gates. One morning I was chopping firewood when she rolled up in her shiny SUV, parking like she owned the whole place. She stepped out wedge heels, clicking on the gravel like she was walking on a red carpet, and I could already tell she was about to say something stupid. She pointed at my cabin and said, "You can't have this structure here. It doesn't fit Willow Creek's architectural standards." I looked at her, leaned on my axe, and replied, "You're standing on the Nash family land. This isn't Willow Creek." Cheryl wasn't having it. She pulled out a manila envelope, waved it like it was a holy document, and said, "Actually, our records show that your property borders our HOA jurisdiction. With the new annexation lines approved by the board, your land is now under our regulation." I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. "You're out of your mind," I said. She didn't back down. "You've got 30 days to vacate or we'll start eviction proceedings." Eviction from my own land. A few days later, I received an official letter from the HOA's legal rep, full of fake maps, doctored boundary lines, and citations for things like unauthorized log construction and historically incompatible exterior design. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was all nonsense. But here's where things took a turn. They had no idea who they were messing with. You see, my great-great-grandfather was one of the original settlers here. When the Tennessee Homestead Land Act passed, he was one of the recipients of that land grant. And that grant is ironclad. Never sold, never divided, still in the family's name. I wasn't about to let some HOA president try to steal it with a manila folder full of fake papers. I grabbed the original land grant from its frame and called my old buddy Zachary Mullen, a local attorney who used to deal with property law before he gave it up to run a bait shop. He was still sharp, though. I showed him the bogus documents, and after a quick glance, he whistled. "They're trying to evict you from this," he said, his voice rising in disbelief. "Let me take this case," he grinned. "I haven't worn a suit in years. Hope you've still got one that fits." The next morning, Zachary showed up at my cabin wearing a suit so wrinkled it looked like it had survived a hurricane. He came in holding a thermos of black coffee and a folder full of documents. "First things first," he said. "We're heading to the county recorder's office." Zachary went to work fast. He found the original land survey from 1861, and guess what? The HOA's map was a complete fabrication. They'd drawn their boundary lines right over my property like they were playing a video game. They filed it with the county clerk without going through the proper channels, no signatures, no zoning hearings, just dumped it in the records pile. That was tampering with public records. It got worse. Cheryl had filed a forged land transfer form claiming I had voluntarily submitted my land to the HOA's jurisdiction. My name was on the form, but the signature, that was a joke. The notary stamp used on it belonged to someone who hadn't been licensed in years. Zachary and I went straight to Sheriff Mendes, a no-nonsense guy who had been working the county long before Cheryl had ever heard of an HOA. When we handed him the forged documents, he didn't blink. This kind of fraud, he said, that's a felony. Multiple felonies. We had Cheryl dead to rights. The sheriff quickly got to work, and by that afternoon, he had a warrant to seize the HOA's records. Turns out Cheryl wasn't just targeting me. She'd been pulling this scam on multiple properties around the development, even forcing elderly homeowners to sell under fake fines. By the end of the day, the sheriff's deputies raided the HOA office, serving Cheryl with a warrant while she was in a board meeting. According to the reports, she tried to talk her way out of it, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. She had crossed the line into criminal activity. We gathered all the evidence we could, and Zachary and I filed a countersuit. The next morning, Cheryl tried to throw me off again, this time with a handwritten notice saying I was inciting hostility. It was a joke. I showed it to Zachary, and we had a good laugh. "She knows it's coming," he said. The court hearing came soon after. Judge Harold Bixby, a silver-haired man who had seen every kind of dispute over his 30 years on the bench, didn't waste any time. "Let's see the original land grant," he said. When I handed it over, he held it up and said, "This document is older than anyone in this room. I suggest we move on." He had clearly made up his mind. Cheryl's lawyer tried to object, but the judge cut him off. "This is criminal fraud," Judge Bixby said. "Miss Netherly, you will face these charges in a separate proceeding." And just like that, I got my land back. The whole courtroom felt like it had exhaled at once. Cheryl's empire crumbled fast after that. I learned that she had been embezzling HOA funds funneled into her own personal account for landscaping trips and even new patio furniture. She was using HOA money for personal gain. The county put the Willow Creek HOA into temporary receivership, and soon the other board members started resigning. One of them, Kent, came to my cabin pale and worn out. He admitted he'd voted for the annexation policy but didn't check the forms. He regretted it, but the damage had been done. A few months after the trial, I replaced Cheryl's old SUV-ravaged gate, fixed up my cabin, and put in a few apple trees. It felt right, bringing some life back to the place that had been in my family for generations. Zachary dropped by one day, handed me a manila envelope, and told me the land was officially safe. No more HOA jurisdiction ever. Cheryl's trial was still fresh and life on the land returned to normal. Quiet, no fake fines, no threats, just bird songs, the wind, and the sounds of the land. But there was something about Cheryl's past that still lingered. A few weeks later, I found an anonymous letter in my mailbox, a photo of Cheryl from years ago, standing in front of a house with two kids smiling like a completely different person. It was a reminder that power changes people and sometimes they forget where they came from. But for me, nothing changed. The land was mine. Cheryl had tried to control everything she could see, but now she'd spend the next decade looking at four walls. Moral of the story: power and control may be enticing, but it can't change the roots of who you are. It can't change the land beneath your feet. The truth always has a way of coming out, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. Well, what do you think? Can anyone really own the land? Or does it belong to those who have lived with it, worked on it, and loved it for generations?
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.